So, are you confused yet? Well, it's a pretty confusing situation. What you have now is a royalist Mexico that is governed by a Republican Spain. In 1812, there's an overthrow of the Spanish monarchy, or what's left of it after the French withdrawal, and it's replaced by a Republican government. Well, this Republican government starts giving orders to the royalists in Mexico, who have done a very good job of suppressing the Republicans in Mexico, telling them to lay off. Well, this sends a lot of mixed signals, as you can imagine, into the royalist ranks in Mexico. They do not lay off, and in fact, they get more intentional and more intensive in their attempts to run down and exterminate any of the last remnants of Republican armies that might be hiding in the hills or operating in the south with Morelos. And in fact, they catch Morelos, and in 1815, he is shot. So now, what we have is a splintered Republican movement in Mexico, an intensifying royalist base in Mexico opposing these Republicans, but a Republican government in Spain that's telling the royalists in Mexico to back off. It's a mess. And into this vacuum, you see a number of players move in. These people include people like Vicente Guerrero. Vicente Guerrero was one of Morelos' officers and a successor after his chief is killed. Guadalupe Victoria, another Morelos officer, takes his army and continues the Republican fight. Then you have a Spanish Republican by the name of Francisco Javier Mina that shows up, and he rounds up an army. And so now you have three Republican armies moving around inside of Mexico trying to overthrow the royalists, and the royalists are busy trying to figure out who's really in charge back in Madrid. While Mexico burns, the United States concludes its war somewhat successfully with the British. Napoleon loses everything, and Europe is starting to stabilize as well. There's a new wave of royalist restoration going on in Europe. The Americans, however, now relieved of any sort of distraction with the British, want to address a permanent solution with Spain about the border between American territories and Spanish territories. The result is the Adams-Onis Treaty of 1819, or the Intercontinental Treaty. Part of what happens to spawn this treaty is that the Americans had figured out how to put pressure on Spain to cede Florida to the United States. Part of that agreement is they will relinquish any claims that they have on Texas in exchange for a fixed boundary. The Spanish take a look at this and say, you know, we need a fixed boundary for Texas worse than we need Florida. You can have Florida. We need Texas secure. And that brought about this treaty. So the Adams-Onis Treaty looks like it's going to put some stability back onto the Spanish frontera. But really, it doesn't buy them much time. And in the midst of these negotiations, in the midst of the guerrilla conflict that's going on down in Mexico and the insurgencies and the Republican armies that are prowling about, you have the rise of a new creature in the Americas, a filibustero, a filibusterer.